There's new research that does seem to suggest that there's a growing consciousness among voters around the issues of economic inequality, specifically how our systems around tax, housing, health and education work. Do they just make the rich richer and the poor poorer? The question here is, how can we establish a happy and socially cohesive community when inequality exists? Joining me now from Redbridge Group is Redbridge Group Director Simon Welsh. Simon, great to see you. So have you shifted the research this week into that question around inequality, or has it naturally gone there from the people that you speak to? This is top of mind.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Absolutely. This is coming from the grassroots up. It's not been sort of a change of direction from research and us. There has been, I think, a subtle but important shift in the conversations. When we talk to people about cost of living, when we talk to them about whether it's health services or whatever it is, it's gone from, I would say, sort of 12 months ago, and you and I have discussed this, where people were sort of, big on what I'd sort of summarise as corporate bashing. The idea that corporates aren't paying their way, they're ripping us off. This sort of thing was quite prevalent. That's really become a more enriched and more nuanced sort of worldview, that there's sort of this view out there now that, and I'm talking about middle Australia here, I'm not talking about the hyper politically engaged, or I'm not talking about the young, really sort of socially minded. I'm just talking about ordinary middle working Australians, that there's this sense that something's rotten in the state of Denmark, that they see it in the tax system, where, as you sort of mentioned in your introduction, this idea that there's these structures that perpetuate and are exacerbating inequality. And they'll use that word, inequality. It's not a word that we're sort of putting a label on what they're saying. They're talking about this. They're saying the tax system perpetuates it, the property market perpetuates it, the way health and education services are funded and the access to those services is perpetuating these sorts of inequalities. And and for women in our groups at the moment, there's a real edge to this around gender inequality, and particularly violence and those sorts of things, which those heartbreaking things that are happening. It's become a really mainstream discussion in a way that it wasn't 12 months ago. That there is this sort of fundamental break in the system, in the social compact. I mean, that's my word, not their words. But this idea that the basis of what the Australian society should be based upon is disintegrating.
It sounds like what you're talking about is this kind of collective despondency, and we've been we speak every week, and I think you've been certainly building up to that. So what does it do then, Simon? We talk about aspirational voters, but where are those aspirational voters when there seems to be this despondency where people in some quarters have just given up, saying there is no point in banging your head up against a brick wall, we're never going to get ahead? What does that do to the politics?
Yeah, I think the politics around this is going to be fascinating. And certainly I don't want to sort of convey a sense that, middle Australia's fired up with this revolutionary zeal and they're all off to vote for the Socialist Alliance. That's not where it's heading. I think where it's heading is, certainly right at the moment, it's not playing out in a Labor versus Liberal division. So it's not about people jumping off Labor and jumping off Liberal or vice versa, because that both seem to be as bad as each other on this stuff. And I think that's the point. I think what we're going to see going forward is a loss of patience. I think we're going to see voters that won't, particularly these aspirational voters, but not only, that won't tolerate timidity in governments and won't tolerate lack of urgency in governments. And I think where this is leading us is, the old adage in Australian politics that you elect someone, you get them for 2 terms. I think those days are going, and I think they're going quickly. I think what we're going to see is increasing intolerance to deal with these deep issues from voters. If governments don't look like they're making an effort, don't have to solve it all, but look like they're making an effort. People often talk to us in the group, we don't expect them to wave a magic wand, but we expected them to be on our side. And if that's not happening in first-term governments, I don't think, we're going to see that old sort of tolerance and permission from Australians to go and have another go and give you a second term. I think we are heading into not only party political volatility with the splintering of the vote, but I think we are heading into a period of governmental volatility in the terms of one-term governments if they don't act with urgency on this sort of stuff.
Well, they don't seem to have urgency. I mean, how many reviews and reports can you do? And that adage has been true for many decades, that's what governments do. And I think people are starting to realise when they don't know what to do, they ask for an inquiry. Now, not all of it is like that. Sometimes you do need to look a little deeper into how things are working. But I just see there's pictures coming into us. They were just on our screen about Anthony Albanese in Alice Springs. He'll be talking about a number of issues, including Alice in just a moment. But Simon, I don't expect you to have, done focus groups that would have raised this already. But at the weekend, there was this women's rally and this controversy, which should actually be a sideline issue, but it's not, because it just speaks to a tone deafness from Anthony Albanese. And after Scott Morrison, I think women expected more from him, and they don't feel like, and I'm not talking about women as one homogenous group here, but they don't feel like they got that at the weekend. How's that going to go down, do you think?
I think, as you say, we haven't had time to put that into the field yet, but I think it speaks to a deeper problem for Anthony Albanese. Certainly what we've been seeing over the last little bit is this sense of lost opportunity, lost promise around Anthony Albanese. And there's sort of a bit of a psychology at play here, which is Labor came in and Anthony Albanese came in with a fair bit of hope behind. There was a large proportion of the electorate that were just happy to see Scott Morrison and that Liberal government go, and there was a sense of expectation around Anthony Albanese. And that expectation has been deflated. But I think what makes it worse is the lack of action on key issues like the gender violence issue, from a Prime Minister that built a persona around, I'm the boy from social housing, public housing, raised by a single mother. He should have been part of the in-group of these women particularly, but it's on economic issues as well. It's broader than that. Here's a bloke who should have understood what it was like to do it hard and should have been working his butt off for Australians that are doing it hard. And they're not seeing that. So you get this sense of betrayal. And, going back to my old psychology days, human beings punish people who betray the in-group harsher than they punish people who were outside the in-group and of whom they had no expectations in the first place. So I think it's a really dangerous period for Anthony Albanese, and just little things like that event on the weekend just add to this sense of this bloke was supposed to be on our side and we don't feel like we're getting what we wanted or what we expected.
Simon, we'll speak about something uplifting one of these days. Just maybe. Thanks so much for your insights as always. See you soon.
Thanks, Laura.